Hello and welcome to this virtual showcase from Brinqa. 60 minutes of industry-leading insight and knowledge sharing dedicated to one vital topic, and that's reframing vulnerability management. We're going to unpack how we can apply a risk-based approach to infrastructure, AppSec, and cloud security. Now, folks, let's just start off with a home truth. Vulnerability management is hard. Security teams have been given what feels at times to be an almost impossible mission, which is effectively managing risk at the same speed that their business is moving. They have to identify, measure, manage a broadening horizon, ever broadening horizon of attack surfaces, not to mention persuade or even politic with internal stakeholders and clients to get the resources, the budget that they need to do their jobs. And plenty of leaders in this space are struggling. In fact, according to a recent report by Osterman Research, 81% of developers admit to knowingly releasing vulnerable apps. And 76% say they've experienced pressure to sacrifice security in favor of convenience. I'll say it again, vulnerability management is hard. But today's event is all about exploring what exactly has changed in this space and how industry leaders like yourselves can tackle it successfully and confidently. My name's Julia Bell. I'm going to be your host today. I'll be talking with our speakers and panelists, but I'll also be inviting you up onto the stage to get involved with the discussion and pose questions to our experts directly. It really is that easy to get directly involved. So what we're going to be talking about today, and more importantly, who we're going to be talking to. Let's take a look at the agenda. So to set the scene, I'll be joined on stage by Ravi Pentapati, cybersecurity evangelist at Brinqa. Ravi's going to first contextualize today's key talking points and give us his insight into the changing landscape in vulnerability management. Following that, I'll actually hand the reins of facilitation over to Ravi to facilitate a fantastic panel discussion with Martin Carroll, Global Security Vulnerability Management Product Lead at Nestle, and Steve Hawkins, Director of Security Architecture and Engineering at Cambia Health. That session's going to be an exclusive opportunity to get real with practitioners who have gone through it, are going through it, and are more than happy to offer their learnings and perhaps some mistakes on that journey. What's more, folks, there'll be lots of interactive polls in today's event, so our speakers can sense check where you sit on these issues and debrief the learning with me on stage in real time. In fact, speaking of polls, I'd love to check in with you just now. So you should see a poll question appearing on your screens, and it asks the following: what do you hope to take away from our event today? Are you aiming to acquire knowledge or learn something new? Are you focused on gaining key insights from the panel and my chat with Ravi? Are you looking for content that's relevant to your role and your responsibilities? Or did you want to gain a better understanding of Brinqa? Folks, it's multiple choice, so feel free to submit as many responses as you like. That question again, what do you hope to take away from our event today? Do you want to acquire knowledge or learn something new, gain key insights from the sessions, capture content that's relevant to you, or gain a better understanding of Brinqa? It's multiple choice, so submit answers as you like and get your answers in now if you can, please, because I'll count you down to that poll closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, thank you so much. That poll is now closed. It's really great for us to gain your insight so we can make these events the best that they can be. And with that, let's get this started, shall we? I'll now welcome up to our stage the opening speaker, cybersecurity evangelist at Brinqa, Ravi Pentapati. Hello to you, Ravi. How are you?
Hey, Julia, can you hear me?
I can, Ravi. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig into some insight with you. But first off, can I just get a sense of your journey with this topic and what brought you from Warner to here to be on stage with me today?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. For those of you who don't know me, I know actually a fair number of the people in the audience today, so that's really cool. I actually ran a litany of programs at Warner Media, including vulnerability management, cloud security, application security, and security engineering and architecture functions, et cetera, et cetera. And for those of you who don't know, Warner Media was previously the corporate parent for CNN, HBO, Cartoon Network, et cetera, et cetera. And just recently I had the opportunity to join Brinqa as a something of a customer advocate, and I really WarnerMedia was a very significant customer of Brinqa at that point in time, and yeah, so here I am today, and it was a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and what an interesting journey to go from that customer perspective to now here with that evangelist role. And can I ask, just to kick off the conversation with your perspective, what would you say are the biggest changes in this landscape that leaders ought to be wary of and ought to be aware of?
Yeah, so I think really the biggest piece that leaders across the board, and this is not even specific to cybersecurity or vulnerability management, it's just technology leaders in general. The landscape of technology infrastructure, of applications, of microservices, APIs, et cetera, it's changed so rapidly. And I think I can probably speak for myself and a number of other people to state that what we do today significantly different than what it was 5 years ago, even for a year ago. Like container security might not have been a part of your journey. API security might not have been on your roadmap. Like a CI/CD pipeline security might not have been on your roadmap. It's such a significantly different landscape, and just from purely a technology point of view. And as a result of that, the security risk kind of follow that, right? So with all of these different components and the interconnected nature of them, we have the ability to introduce more risk to the environment, and I think that is probably the biggest thing that has changed. And we'll certainly be getting more of that with the panel.
Yeah, and it feels as if you really are going to kind of survive in this space, you just have to get comfortable with constant change. It's almost like you can't
Yeah.
get married to any approach or any status quo.
Absolutely. One of a key technology leader that I used to work for, he really stated something that resonated with me. It's just, Ravi, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That is the world that you live in, and you just need to accept it. And honestly, things got easier after that.
Right? It's liberating, I suppose.
Exactly.
And just on that note of discomfort, if you will, can you talk us through, and of course we'll unpack that later properly in the panel, but these key challenges that we're looking at and inspecting today, what would you say that leaders are facing, and what have you faced?
So I would say that the key challenge is just the unknown, so to speak, right? We don't know what we don't know, and that constant discovery process as to what's actually in our environments, and what even for the stuff that we do know, and then consequently on top of that, all the unknowns out there and the discovery that goes and the security risk that might be associated with them. I think those are the biggest pieces for me, right? And some ways you handle that, or just you take it day by day, and then you think small and think in manageable chunks. And I think if any leader or any practitioner, any engineer, if they're kind of approaching the problem in that manner, it's going to serve them well in the long term.
Right. And I know that we've got this slide. I'll actually ask production if you could kindly bring that up for us. And Ravi, perhaps you could sort of talk us through at a high level these key challenges that have been laid out by yourselves and how we might approach those in the conversation at the event today.
Yeah, so I mean, in short, I think we kind of talked a little bit about these first two pieces already, right? So just the explosion of tools and findings that kind of comes along with the territory associated with more technology in our space, like API security is probably a great example. Just a few years ago, API security tools weren't a thing, and all of a sudden, we understand that there's more risk there than we've accepted in the past, and hence there's been a whole kind of cottage industry around API security tools. So that's a huge piece of this, right? So that being a small example representative of the whole, right? Cloud security, posture management, container security products, et cetera. And each one of these come with the commensurate people, process, and technology needed to address it.
Mm-hmm.
So to piggyback on that, right? The poor asset visibility that is mentioned there. So if you integrated with one API, and then you haven't integrated with all of them, all of a sudden I have unknown risk across the enterprise that I haven't addressed.
Right.
And so I think those two go hand in hand very well. Ownership complexity is a very, very complex topic that I think pretty much every practitioner on this call this event is going to resonate with, because ultimately, okay, we have an asset, we have a piece of code, we have an application. I mean, how do we get it fixed? Oh, well, I guess it has to come back down to a person, a team, an entity that can actually address and impact that change. And then, and finally, like when it comes to, kind of speaking as as members of our business as opposed to kind of our community, I think when we translate the notion of a remote code execution vulnerability to us as practitioners, we resonate that's kind of a very, very big deal, and it needs to be addressed immediately. Unfortunately, our CFO and our CEO and our CTO don't think like that, right? And so we tend to speak a little bit too much in the micro of this is a technical issue and a technical risk, and don't talk in terms of business impact. I think generally speaking, as we start to broaden our maturity both as an industry and as individuals, we'll eventually get there where we're speaking more in terms of business context and wrapping that up.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by that cultural and unification piece. How can security leaders make sure that they're not just kind of screaming into an echo chamber when they talk about this as a priority, and how can they make sure that it goes at the same pace as what the business is trying to achieve, doesn't hold it back, but also alerts everyone to the importance of these topics?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, like, to that point, you mentioned earlier that 81% of developers knowingly push code that's vulnerable.
Right.
I'm surprised that number's not 100, to be completely honest with you. There's a 19% of people who are lying, in my opinion, there. So.
Well, I used to work in political broadcasting, and we did used to say, don't listen to the polls because people lie. So that's an interesting insight from you, Ravi. Now, listen, I know that I'm going to touch back in with you very shortly to facilitate this panel discussion that I know you're kindly doing. But in the meantime, folks, I'd love to just come to you off the back of Ravi's insight there on these key challenges. Can we check in and see what resonates with you? You'll see a poll question appearing about now on your screens, and this time I'll unpack the results on stage with our panelists. So we'd love to know, what is the biggest challenge that you are facing in your vulnerability management program? Now, perhaps all of those resonate with you, but actually we'll just ask that you pick one so we can get a hone in on those priorities. So is it the explosion of tools and findings? Is it poor asset visibility? Is it this ownership complexity that Ravi ran through? In other words, when the proliferation of specialized teams makes remediation hard? Is it security speak? So when security reporting just doesn't reflect business priorities? Or is it something else? Perhaps we've missed something that sticks out in your mind, in which case we'd love to know what that is in the chat. So you can vote for that and then let us know. My producer, his name is Carl, he'll let me know in my ear. So that question just needs one answer, and then we can get them in the form of statistics. Feel free to be as honest as you like, because it's all anonymous. We just see numbers. That question once more: what's the biggest challenge you are facing in your vulnerability management program? Is the explosion of tools and findings, poor asset visibility, ownership complexity, security speak, or is it something else? Get your answers in, because the big boss Carl in my ear is telling me that we're ready to close that poll. I'll count you down. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That poll is now closed. Thank you so much for taking part. I can't wait to unpack those results with our panelists, who I'm delighted to welcome up to the stage. Now, Ravi will join me again, but this time with Martin Carroll, Global Security Vulnerability Management Product Lead at Nestle, and Steve Hawkins, Director of Security Architecture and Engineering at Cambia Health. Folks, welcome to all of you.
Great to be here.
Hello. Yes, great to have you. I can hear you. That is good. So I'd love to just kick off with some quick introductions and get a sense of your roles, if I may. Martin, could I start with you just for an introduction into your world, and, if you would, an insight into why this topic is so prevalent for you?
Basically, my role is at Nestle, where we are centralizing or trying to centralize vulnerability management for all global Nestle. We started this some years ago as a part of Security Operations Center, and definitely all of these challenges resonate with us exactly. So I guess this is same for all the big companies. And yeah.
I think that if anything, Martin, this can be, if you like, a bit of a therapy session as well as a best practice panel. So feel free. And then Steve, do you mind if I come to you next, just again for an introduction and a sense of your journey with this topic?
Yeah, so I'm Steve Hawkins. I'm our Director of Security Architecture and Engineering at Cambia Health. We're a small regional payer up in the northwest part of the country, the United States. So hello to everybody. But yeah, we've not unlike all of you have been on a journey to, get the foundational components of VM in place. Things like proactive patch management, getting scanning deployed broadly and deeply across our enterprise. And as Robbie mentioned earlier, get a real good understanding of the assets involved and their significance. And so just a lot of foundational components even before introducing some of what we'll talk about today with Brinqa. But we're super excited to be here to share some of our successes and some of our learnings. So hopefully be really honest with you guys about what we did and did not do well, maybe help you avoid a few gotchas in the future.
Oh, that is so kind, and I'm really looking to unpacking those. I think that's my favourite bit, to be honest, that candour and that transparency. So thank you in advance. Now, before I hand the reins over to Ravi to facilitate the conversation, I'd love to actually just run through these poll results with you folks. Production team, could we get those poll results up? Because, of course, we just asked our audience and guests what the biggest challenge that you are facing is in your VM programme. Pretty even spread, really, but the big front runner here is ownership complexity at 37%, and then second place, poor asset visibility, 21% explosion of tools and findings, and then security speak actually came bottom. Only 4% of you said something else. Even to you, though, I'd love to know what that is. If you could, pop that in the chat and then Carl can let me know. But Martin, perhaps I could come to you first. What do you make of that? Ownership complexity is the biggest one. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely this is a good one. And I think there is a key to have let's say, a lot of flexibility in the different operational models of vulnerability management. Of course, it's not the same to have like a critical infrastructure where everything is very well defined, all the systems are scanned, and everything is nice. But then with the bigger the company, the more complex, you will have a lot of environments, a lot of devices where you have much less maturity, or actually maybe you even want to have less maturity because you don't want to pay for all the scanning and all the heavy process. So basically here the key is to really be flexible and have different models for different type of environments. And of course, this can help with both of these points, which actually came as the main ones, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And the key is to be flexible. But in order to do that, you need those resources, you need that buy-in. So it kind of all feeds in together. Steve, can I get your reaction to those poll results? Did they kind of reflect your sentiment?
Absolutely. We're all in the same journey together, it appears, because a big part of our investment was understanding our environment, right? And part of that is all that contextual data that you need in order to make the vulnerabilities and the remediations visible to the right people and actionable. And so we partnered a lot with teams to do that discovery, whether it's through a traditional CMDB, which I know is kind of a nasty word in some organizations because it's never as good as you want it to be. It's tough to keep current and maintain, but we really put the challenge to our team, which manages that, and say, hey, we rely upon you in order to provide us that good contextual data, or else we're not going to get the right information to the right people. And then in a lot of cases for cloud and other places where You can do things with tagging assets and things like that to help identify ownership, and then cascade that through a platform like Brinqa, which will help you marry up all that vulnerability data with all the contextual data on asset ownership and application ownership. That's when you hit that moment of being able to bring the right information to the right people. So it's exactly where we spend most of our time, especially up front.
Yeah. There is something quite satisfying about how we're all kind of encountering quite similar journeys and quite similar pain points. Speaking of which, we've had a couple of people write in into the chat function, which we love, with this something else option. So one individual wrote very kindly, incumbent security providers have fallen behind the risks. This isn't just about visibility, it's about control and automation for us. Thank you so much for sending that in. And then just under that, we find even less documentation on API to explore the data out of the API. And then finally, I'll just read you this last one. Concise, actionable reporting has been a pain point. Ravi, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it all tracks, right? That's why all of these. That's why this problem's so hard. You have to do a lot of things right to make it an effective discipline. The interesting piece of like kind of the actionable reporting. I think it really kind of goes back to one of those key challenges. I think actionable reporting and security speed kind of go hand in hand a little bit, right? And so to the extent that we can take a really nebulous statement around change this configuration, yada, yada, yada. We can package that up and say, make this one, modify this one code file with this piece, then all of a sudden you might have reduced friction in that process and things like that. So yeah, I kind of see it as two parts of the same whole.
Yeah, these parts all kind of feed into each other. And like you say, it becomes this ever-growing balancing act for security leaders such as yourselves. With that, Ravi, I will hand you the floor to facilitate this panel discussion.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. So before we even get started, one thing I really wanted to talk to just in general was hopefully this session and this discussion is going to be pragmatic and practical. Martin, Steve, and I have extensive experience with respect to constructing vulnerability management programs, operating them, and we've not only have we experienced some successes, there have also been some challenges and road and speed bumps that we've encountered along the way as well. So, in the spirit of transparency, we wanted to make sure to kind of circle back around on those pieces. With that said, I think one of the really important things to talk about up front is kind of our environments, right? And because I recognize that not every company is the same, not every technology posture is the same, and not every set of cybersecurity risks is the same. Even across Nestle, Cambia Health, Warner Media, you have just discrete constituent risk associated with each one of those businesses. So if we don't mind, I'll start, just kind of explaining what the landscape looked like in my experience. And then, Martin, Steve, feel free to echo. By virtue of working in a media and entertainment company, anything went with respect to our technology posture in a good way, right? We enable creativity. We wanted developers and engineers to feel like they're empowered to create and make sure that they're developing applications that are used by users, eyeballs, generating that kind of traffic. As a result, we had tens of thousands of workstations across tens of thousands of employees, thousands plus cloud accounts, tens of thousands of virtual machines, container workloads, web applications, et cetera. Steve, what about you? What did your landscape look like in terms of just assets that you knew about or know about presently?
Yeah, I think, even though we're slightly smaller scale than probably either of you, certainly, thousands of endpoints, thousands of servers. And, that's where a lot of people start, right? They start with those, how many servers and endpoints, but then you really start to dig deep and you're like, well, we're hybrid like most companies, right? We have our own data center and colo as well as being in the cloud. And so you have assets in the cloud, whether they're traditional AWS EC2, more and more containerized workloads, serverless functions, And flaws can exist everywhere. And so you feel like you just keep peeling back the onion and you move beyond some of the traditional assets and into, broadening your definition of asset to, things like Lambdas in AWS or functions in Google Cloud. And you're like, wow, those can have runtimes that are unsupported. Those can have libraries which are out of date, just like what you're used to on traditional compute. So you really have to continue to spread out, identify all those things, and again, make sure you have good contextual data on all of them.
Yep. Martin, what about you? What does your environment look like in terms of systems and assets?
I would say, all possible things you can imagine. So a couple of 100,000 workstations, tens of thousands servers, hundreds of factories with all possible devices, and then obviously now the big move to cloud, no? So all possible cloud models with all cloud vendors, and well, of course, then the website part, which is thousands of websites with brands and.
Yep, of course. Now, all that said, I think we talked about very diverse environments here between the three of us, in very large environments too. But I think a lot of the lessons that I hope to take away, or a lot of the talking points I hope to speak to, can be applicable to companies of any size, right? If we're talking about even a small startup with 10, 15, 20 employees, to all the way to, to Walmart here in the US, which is millions of employees, right? I think the resonant messages are hopefully going to be the same. So, before now, one thing I wanted to kind of focus on up front, right? Some of the strengths of our programs. So Steve, can you actually speak to me a little bit about your security report card program and the successes that you've had with it?
Sure. This is where Brinqa comes into our story. Again, we started back with a lot of those foundational components I mentioned before. Proactive patch management, dependency management, understanding the assets involved, and whatnot. But usually using the Brinqa platform to bring together all of the rich telemetry from our scanners, whether again they're against servers, endpoints, containers, code. Serverless, as I mentioned, and marrying those up with all the contextual data to understand, who the owner is, what's the business criticality of this asset. We work in a regulated industry, and so for us, the sensitivity of the data involved is super important. So for us, it would be PHI that we're protecting, at all costs. And so using the Brinqa platform to bring all that together in a view that could allow us to create some compelling, actionable reporting. And so we leveraged an approach that we actually borrowed a bit from one of our companies within Cambia that did this same approach for grading medications with regards to cost and quality for our members. They do a simple grade, right? And so for us, we took each application and assigned a grade across different categories like host vulnerabilities, container vulnerabilities, code vulnerabilities, configuration vulnerabilities. Graded each of those based on the distance that that app had from what our expected SLAs are for remediating those flaws. And the further they got away from that SLA, past that SLA, the further their grade dropped. And it was just a real straightforward way for people to understand where they stood and essentially evoke a response, right? And we really targeted this reporting mostly to our middle and senior leadership because we found that those were the folks who knew a little less of what was going on. It wasn't the engineers and the analysts, it was the folks in those positions of authority who had maybe the most ability to help their teams prioritize and resource addressing vulnerabilities, but yet they really had no easy way to understand where they stood. And so that report card that they had could allow them to understand where they stood and then go back to their teams and ask, hey, what can I do to support you in achieving your goals, our goals around vulnerability management, and get, say, from a B or a C up to where we want to be, which would be an A.
Yeah, which is and really, to be really specific, when we're talking about grades, we are literally talking about the way we rank students in the US, where
Right.
ABCDF, right? And
something we all can relate to. Yeah, something we all can relate to. Everybody understands. Everybody went to school, and it's funny because it also kind of evokes a little bit of a competitive spirit in people, right? We didn't make those grades private. Those grades for those applications are public across our company, so everybody could see where everybody stands. And it created a little bit of healthy competition, especially among some of our leaders, to want to show well among their peers. And while we didn't want it to be any type of shaming exercise, we certainly appreciated the healthy competition it created.
Absolutely.
And maybe got a few teams unstuck,
Absolutely.
from where they had traditionally been.
Absolutely. And another anecdote that to kind of illustrate the journey that Steve's been on here. Steve, would you like to kind of speak to spreadsheets and RAM and where you started your vulnerability management journey?
Yeah, this was slightly before my time, but the rumor is that before we had a platform like Brinqa, which allows you to take in a tremendous amount of data and add all that context and do some fast index searching. We had vulnerabilities, managed in a spreadsheet, probably like many of you, probably 5 to 10 years ago. And rumor was it got so large at times that our analysts couldn't open it on their laptops, and so we had to keep throwing more resources at their laptop in order to get it to be workable. And so with the help of a platform like Brinqa, we dug ourselves out of that hole, and now have a place to do not only our formatted reporting, the report cards I mentioned, and other things, dashboards, but even that ad hoc searching capability when you're doing some, looking for, specific, like CSICEVs or something like that, and you really want to drill in ad hoc. It's super fast. Absolutely. And unlike anything else that we tried before.
Yeah, well, I thought that was super funny. I certainly resonate. For the record, many a spreadsheet that I tried to download from Qualys I've never opened on my laptop. It's just running in the background somewhere on if I'm not mistaken. So Martin, let's pivot over to you, right? I understand that your program is actually so proactive that you alert owners to vulnerabilities without even scanning for them. I think that's a really cool discipline and very impressive. Do you mind speaking more about and sharing more about this approach?
Actually, this was something as a key part of the process that we wanted to kind of maintain. That was something that was already built long time ago, but it was super manual effort in the past. So we were searching for a platform where we can actually make this more automated. What we do essentially, we collect all the vulnerability feeds from the vendors. We enrich this with threat intelligence and basically calculate risk rating based on our criteria and so on. And then we bundle those vulnerabilities according to patching calendars, and this creates tickets that are then kind of representing and are sent to the patching teams. Here, the important part is that we can do this very easily without scanning, without any kind of extra effort. So it's very quick to set up, simply saying what scope of the software each team manage. And then we can start increasing maturity little by little, assigning the group of devices that are represented by this scope and so on. This is also very quick. So as soon as the vulnerabilities are published by vendors, the teams already start working on the patching. They know what will be their SLA from the start because we already give them our ratings. And then as soon as we basically scan some of these environments, so it's not mandatory. So for critical environments where we do scanning, the results from vulnerability scanner are linked to these original tickets. And that way we also can give them extra tracking. So they don't not only need to look at the deployment tools, but they will see, okay, so is security still see vulnerabilities? And we directly show them inside of the same ticket the vulnerabilities that were assigned to this. Then on top of that, this allows us to really separate. So as you were saying, the huge sheet, Excel sheet with all the vulnerabilities. Now with this, we separate all the vulnerabilities that are already managed by these teams. So the ones that we already know that they are in their scope of the regular release every month, or I don't know, Windows or whatever. So these vulnerabilities, they are linked to these tickets. And then we are only left with the vulnerabilities that were on top of this. So if scanner finds application, we didn't even know it's on the systems. Now we only need to take care of these few vulnerabilities, not on all these millions of vulnerabilities, but only the small results. And then we assign ownership then according to these teams. No? So there is this global team doing operating system. This goes to the original ticket. Then vulnerabilities discovered on top of this, they will go probably to application owner of the applications that is running on this. So that's kind of the model that we build up, and I think that's kind of very nice.
Yep. Very, very cool. Now, so I think one thing that stands out to me is with respect to all the programs that we've run, we have just an immensely diverse environments with cloud hosts and container hosts, and et cetera. So how do you manage it, right? And I think one of the things that a topic we all resonate on is the concept around risk-based vulnerability management and what it means to actually incorporate that in a program as of in 2023. And so, I mean, let's we can. So, of course, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to kind of risk-based vulnerability management. And I want some comments from you guys about why you guys think it's important. I'll start here and just say, for me, being risk-based means that we're really focusing the time and energy of our company on the areas that are the highest risks, right? If a vulnerability that Paula said was critical on a development server that's behind 3 firewalls, I mean, it might not be the most important thing to focus time and energy on. So, I think there's an argument to be made that like a vulnerability like that might not be very important relative to a path traversal vulnerability on an externally facing web server. So, I think that's kind of going back to that messaging piece and the way we kind of speak to the business. I feel like that's an important way that we're going to be able to carry our message going forward, is to be more risk-based. So Steve, Martin, Steve, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I'm excited by this question because I feel ever so slightly rebellious against what may be the traditional definition out there. I think for us at Cambia, what we started with is really looking at putting the conditions in place to be good at the boring stuff, patching, updating dependencies, right? So, Phil Venables, who's the CISO at Google, many of you probably read his blog, which is a great one. If you don't, you should. He has a quote in there that I think is his, maybe he got it from somewhere else, but it's you raise the security baseline by reducing the cost of the control. And so when we started this, we didn't first jump to stratifying vulnerabilities based on different risk attributes. We started with, how do we simply be good at keeping software up to date? Because that's where a predominant amount of the vulnerabilities come from, right? Whether it's in code or containers or on your servers and endpoints. Just keeping that software up to date cuts out a tremendous amount of the equation, right? And so we met with teams and said, what do you need? What do you need in order to be good at this? Do you need more windows to patch and reboot your assets? Do you need to invest in automated tests so that you can quickly take changes and test and deploy those? And we came alongside teams to help them get, whether it was the priority or the funding or the conversations maybe with their business partners, in order to create those conditions where they could be successful. And another stat is I think it was Mend, who's the company that does Renovate for dependency management, which we've adopted and love. They did an analysis of the NPM, the Node Package Manager, a couple of years back, and 90% of the vulnerabilities do not exist in the most recent version of libraries in NPM. And so basically you get good at dependency management, updating your dependencies, and 90% is off the table. Now you're able to focus your energy and maybe introduce some of those concepts of risk-based vulnerability management, but you're doing it against the 10%. Right. You're looking not just at the vulnerability itself, but like you said, Robbie, you're looking at the asset involved. Is it business critical? Is it internet facing? Is it a lower environment? What compensating controls do you have? For us, what kind of data is on it? So Much easier to deal with the 10% than to jump in and try to do that for the 100%. So we really emphasized some of those upfront fundamentals before we even got into the conversation of introducing risk factors.
Very cool. Martin, what about you?
Congrats, Steve, on that one. Yeah. Now, for us, definitely, yeah, that would be the ideal scenario. But yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of different agencies, complexity, different teams with sign-up contracts. Yeah, so it's complex to really reduce this attack surface and get the more aggressive patching. What we do is really to start to try to understand vulnerability compensation controls. If the vulnerabilities are we see them live in our environment. Another thing we link, for example, to the vulnerabilities, we linked our IDS and IPS, for example. No? So we see as soon as there is a signature released by the vendors, we can see that, okay, there is this vulnerability. Then we see from our CM solutions, actually we are getting hits on this vulnerability potentially. This will definitely trigger super emergency meeting and we will start patching. But it's more about this really having the most visibility on the where we have potentially assets that can have vulnerabilities. Then we have very strong process around kind of hot or burning vulnerabilities that we kind of understand, and these ones are exploited in the wild. We have our threat intelligence team giving us constantly feeds and informing us about which are used by which attack vectors, and there is some.
It's funny though. I think that's so cool and so important, right? Like what's actively being exploited in your environment or exploit attempts against your environment. It doesn't get higher risk than that in my view, right? If account takeover if you're just getting hit with a bunch of brute forcing and like password spraying and all of a sudden ATOs are a big thing for your environment. Why not, right? Why not try to turn up the volume on those sorts of potential weaknesses that you have in your websites? So I appreciate, the fact that you have kind of that active telemetry to determine what may or may not be high risk at that point in time.
Right. Jens,
then the important is to have. Yep,
please.
Then the important is really to have visibility where we potentially could have this technology, because maybe we don't scan it, but we know that, okay, maybe these guys run it, So.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about starting small, right? You do it where you can, where you have those IDS and IPS points in place, and then hopefully you can mimic that success elsewhere within the environment. When it comes to like any program of any size, right? And when it comes to like for a 10-person startup to a 100,000 person company to a 1 million person company, this stuff is hard, and I think that's where this whole conversation started. So I would be remiss if I didn't want to hear some of my colleagues here, and Martin and Steve, to hear like some of the challenges that they faced kind of getting these programs stood up, and what were kind of some things that we did to address them. So Martin, maybe can we start with you?
I would say the main challenge when you start that there is no book or there is no something written how you run this kind of program. So normally you go to all the courses and all the people, they just say scan everything and fix everything. Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
So easy.
So first of all, you already, well, I had some experience from other companies, so I had my vision how it should look like, but then you find yourself there are no tools that can support such programs, So all you do it with some Excel sheet, or you build your own tools, or so on. And then, then you are lucky and you find some few that can support such model, like Brinqa could. And then you need to convince your management, okay? So look, we're gonna do this, and it's very different than everybody else tell you, but believe me, this is going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Then a couple of years later of fighting,
you get better at
maybe they start work. So.
Steve,
then, of course, all possible things in between.
Of course. So, Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I think, with our approach, as I mentioned, building these report cards, we really, it really put us out there as far as challenging these teams to improve their grades. And so I think what we were maybe in some ways unprepared for was how much pressure that would come back on us, because it's no longer, it's a good problem to have, right? The attention is back on the security team to make sure the reporting is correct. that you're not inundating people with false positives, that contextual data about the assets, even though we don't manage that contextual data, we grab that from other places, we're seen as the holders of that because we are expressing it through these report cards. So if that's incorrect, if assets are misassigned to an application or to a team, then you kind of end up being the group that gets that. So we had to be ready and improve our response to those things. And because at times people would feel, quite anxious about, improving their grade in time to show it to their business partners or to other technology peers. And so they would put the pressure back on us, like, let's get this fixed, let's get this right. And that's a good problem to have, but I think we were unprepared for how much time that would take back from our team.
That's really interesting.
Thank you so much just for sharing that last tidbit there, each of you. Now, at this juncture, I'd love to welcome up, we've got a few audience questions, and it's great for them to get involved in the discussion, like I say. So thank you to those of you who are ready and waiting. And with that said, I'd love to invite Golan up to the stage first off again. Great to have you back onto the stage. Let's hand you the floor for your question.
Sure. So one of the major challenges that we're dealing with is the fact that the landscape is constantly changing. And what I mean by that is that if you operate in the cloud, which many of us do, we're finding that there's so much research and development going on by the cloud vendors. There are literally new features landing every day. And our developers are always interested in driving those new shiny toys. And of course, the security teams themselves aren't necessarily software developers. I mean, you may have software developers on the security teams, but keeping up sort of with the pace of change is always a challenge. And no security team wants to be the one to say, hey, you can't use these features because we don't understand them. So what is your approach in terms of sort of staying on top of the developments there?
Not it. Not it. So I will say this upfront and candidly. We as a body cannot be an organization that says no to kind of embracing new technologies and developing on top of it, right? So you have a kindred spirit with respect to this question. Now, what we do about it, I think hopefully we have enough smart people and enough kind of intuition to really suss out the big risks right out of the gate, right, with respect to the new features. I think a vast majority of them are kind of making our pipeline stronger, or more resilient, or our operations more resilient. So a lot of them don't carry a lot of security risk. So hopefully, if we're able to, kind of key in on the ones that actually really do present security risk, call it, 80-20 rule, and then hopefully identify what the key pain points might be at that point in time, we can maybe put some guardrails in place right at the organizational level or whatever, Google and Microsoft manifest themselves as. So that's the way we've approached it at my previous organization. Steve, Martin, I'm interested in what you guys have to say about.
I'll just reiterate what you said, Robbie, about, I think the great thing about the time we live in is that I feel like a lot of the products and services that are coming along now, the idea, customers have asked for those products and services to be secure by design, right? And the capabilities inherent in those products and services to be secured from the start. And so we not unlike, I'm sure, Nestle and Warner, and you others have an architecture and design review process up front when new technologies are introduced to Cambia, and that gives us lead time to be able to understand. But I think we mostly see it as an opportunity to leverage capabilities within these new products and services that often will improve the security posture from where we were. A good example is a team came to us and wants to use AWS Bottle Rocket, which is container optimized OS. We'd previously just been using Amazon Linux. And while, initially it could be like, shrug, ooh, that's going to be a lot of, change and, how will our agents work in this new environment and things like that. But the net of it is it's going to be a far, better and more secure solution for us with that, upfront investment. So giving it the time, and hopefully, coming out better as a result is how we've tried to approach most of these.
I would say here definitely the flexibility is the key. So we quickly try to catch up, to learn these solutions, at least to learn the main things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And then to be able to find, for example, vulnerabilities in this. Maybe our scanner solution don't support, or they have architecture that is completely different. And there it comes to the point to really find always the right model and get the data even from the tool itself, like what Steve was mentioning. So maybe the tool itself is producing some kind of findings, alerts, or kind of something. So we can import this and inject this to our current program. And then you need basically a tool that can support this kind of flexibility, and you can leverage all these tools at the end. You don't need to rely only on one.
I was gonna say, I was definitely gonna say rely on third parties to the extent that you can here. And I hate the concept of that knowledge existing with that outside of the organization, but there's always going to be limits to it.
Yeah. Ravi, thank you. Gents, thank you. And Golan, great to have you up on the stage. Such an important question. Really appreciate it. And actually, panelists, if I can steal a couple more moments of your time, we've got time just about for one last question in our session. So at this juncture, I'd love to invite Amy up to the stage. Hello to you. Welcome along. What's your question?
Actually, I had a question for Steve. Steve, you mentioned about how you were bucketing things so that you could do the grading. I'm really interested in understanding how your organization went about bucketing and what were the key things, tips, tricks that you could put out there as far as some things, maybe bumps along the way. Like you mentioned one about people coming back all of a sudden. That was actually great. So any other items you could offer about how you best accomplished that?
Right. So as I mentioned, we really had to first emphasize partners that had that contextual data, whether it's our CMDB team. And so, they had already gone through and associated assets to our application inventory, right? And so we really took an application view. And so we imported that information into Brinqa and all that asset context, and really built a report card by application, including who the owner is and their team. And that application view could be a combination of, like I said, it could be kind of traditional compute, whether it's sitting in your data center or out in the cloud. It would be the code you might be scanning with a SAST or SCA or DAS scanner. It could be a container security scan, where you're looking at container-based images and vulnerabilities that might exist there. And really bringing all those different assets together into one view, all associated to an application. And now you're in a language that pretty much anyone in the enterprise can speak. And no one understands these different components when you start approaching your business partners, and to some degree your senior technology folks. But they understand applications, and they understand the importance of that application to them, to their team, and to their business. And so that as a wrapper was huge. And I think, but it does force you to go back to your enterprise and say, we need this. We're only going to be as good as this information. So we need a application portfolio management program to have that good application inventory. We need the asset discovery to be able to join all of that information together. And that's really a predecessor to doing any of this type of reporting. And then that data is going to be always changing, always slightly flawed. And again, as the expression of that through these report cards, that's where we had to quickly find ways to get that feedback from application owners about that's not my asset, or the scope isn't quite right, back to the teams that could update. And the nice thing is hopefully that now benefits everybody. That contextual data back in our CMDB now is in a better place for everybody in the enterprise, not just the security team. And so that was a net positive for everybody.
Yeah. Steve, thank you so much. And Amy, thank you. Great to have you on stage. Unfortunately, we are running out of time there, but really appreciate that great question. Panelists, really appreciate you sharing your insights and your candor. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been great to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I
Yeah.
know that, Ravi, I'll be catching back up with you very shortly. Huge thanks again to our panelists, Martin Carroll, Global Security Vulnerability Management Product Lead at Nestle, Steve Hawkins, Director of Security Architecture and Engineering at Cambia Health, and of course, Ravi Pentapati, Cybersecurity Evangelist at Brinqa, who, like I say, I'll check back in with in a moment for his key takeaways. But following from that discussion, I'd love to quickly ask where you sit on this. So you'll see our next poll appearing on your screens now, and it asks, where does vulnerability management rank in your security priorities in 2023? Is it very high, high, neutral, low, or very low? That question once more, where does vulnerability management rank in your security priorities in 2023? Is it very high, high, neutral, low, or very low? Get those answers in, because we'll close that poll. I'll count you down in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, that poll is now closed, at which point I'd love to bring Ravi up once more to the stage just to quickly unpack those results with him and get a flavour of his final thoughts before we say goodbye. Ravi, welcome back to the stage. So can I just ask you, before we reveal those poll results, what would you say has stuck out to you from this conversation, and what would you like to leave people with? Oh, you're on mute for me currently. There you go, got you.
Better?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect, great. I guess what stuck out with me was honestly the fact that we have so many bright and engaged professionals across this industry that are kind of encountering the same problems across the board, right? And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get into too much in the inventory piece. I think Steve touched on it on this last response of his from the audience. But like inventory and ownership complexity and kind of those sorts of attributes, like 37% of the audience said that was their biggest challenge. And I think there are some really some interesting challenges that are in this space, and we can really hopefully do something about it. I think there's a whole new suite of products, and Brinqa being one of them, of course, and that hopefully you can address some of this problem as well.
Yeah. And great to just get this sense to unpack them together. Now, very quickly, I'd love to unpack these poll results with you just to see where everyone sits on this issue. Of course, we asked you, where does vulnerability management rank in your security priorities? Okay, wow, I don't think I'm that surprised by this. 46% very high, and then 44% high, and then really very low answers on the rest here. What's your response before we say goodbye?
I guess no surprise, right? It's been a challenge since the beginning. I think we have been encountering vulnerability management issues since cybersecurity first became a thing, and here we are in 2023 and still kind of facing it as a significant problem. And I think we did a pretty decent job of illustrating why it's such a complex challenge.
Yeah, and I wonder actually if some of those answers might have shifted as a result of that conversation. But either way, Ravi, so great to pick your brain. Thanks for taking the time and sharing the stage with me. Thank you.
Likewise, this is super exciting.
Awesome. Take care, folks. That is bringing us to the end. I want to thank Ravi Pentapati for his insight and candor, as well as to all of you for your comments, questions, and engagement in the chat, of course, in this vital discussion. We've certainly covered a lot of ground, but I'd love to lastly know what you think. So I'm going to quickly launch our final poll of the day. Again, this is just for us to gain a bit of insight so we can keep making the best of our time together. So this final poll asks you, what did you take away from our event today? It's multiple choice, so you can answer as many things as you like. Would you say that you've acquired knowledge or learned something new, gained key insights from the discussions, found the content relevant to your role and responsibilities? Have you gained a better understanding of Brinqa? And finally, would you say that you would attend another Brinqa event? Like I say, you can submit as many answers to this one as you like, so take another quick moment to do that if you haven't yet before I count you down, which I'm going to do now in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, thank you. It is a privilege to gain that insight from you. And frankly, we've only just scratched the surface on these discussions. It'd be wrong for the conversation to end here. So what happens next? Well, if you were invited along to today's event by us at GDS and Meet the Boss, then we will facilitate how you can follow up the conversation directly with Brinqa. So keep an eye out for correspondence on that. If you join today via Brinqa directly, they will be reaching out to you to get some thoughts on your experience here today. I'd also, of course, encourage you to connect and link in with today's fantastic speakers and your fellow attendees and experts on the various social platforms so you can continue this vital discussion offline. And folks, that brings us to the end of today's showcase. Until next time, stay safe, everyone. Best of luck with your business endeavors in the new year, and we hope to see you back here at the next virtual showcase very soon indeed.